Welcome to Doing Good HQ. I'm Aaron Jack with Aaron Jack Show, Artist to Art. I'm your host today. We're going to have JJ Weinberg on here. So thank you so much for joining whenever now is. I really appreciate you for joining today's episode. We're going to have JJ Weinberg on here. So thank you so much. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show. We're going to be here with Doing Good HQ, this amazing NFT platform. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Good. And congrats on your winning at the NFT NYC, the traditional artist turned into NFT artist, the best one there was award.
I got nominated. I didn't quite win, so
okay.
But,
You got nominated. You got in there. I want
it
to
was
see your
pretty
traditional art though.
It was pretty humbling. You want to see some of my? We could do a tour of my studio here if you want.
Yeah,
to.
let's do it.
You want to take a look right now?
Yeah. Let's do it. Bring us around.
All right.
You're in charge of your camera.
Right on. Can I flip it while we're on this or no?
Yeah. Flip it around.
Oh, there it is.
You need to.
Perfect. Okay. So here's my. This is where I do my digital stuff. Computer workstation here. Trusty iPad for whenever I'm doing my digital, like all my happy little hairdos stuff obviously did on there. Supplies and whatnot. Speaking of, there's this, but we'll talk about, what they did to Bob Ross a little later maybe. But yeah, this piece is a piece, it's 30 by 40, you can see it's rather large. I've been working on this particular painting since I started the drawing about 4 years ago, and it's turned into, so like there's going to be a series of them. This one here actually is it's a digital embellishment that I did with Arts. He's a hip hop artist, real big in the NFT space as well, and we did this as a Juneteenth drop. So it's like I took my original piece here and then did some digital embellishment with this one and put it to a track of his. So it's like his rapping and everything was going on in the background. And we released it on Juneteenth last year, and we actually made some history, man. This piece, as the digital NFT, was put into a premier auction house in New York, and it actually was auctioned off alongside Banksy and Warhol, Dali, all in the same auction block, and so it was a pretty incredible moment. This is another piece that this one's actually all digital, but I got it printed out on canvas right now, and it's from this series that I've got called A Well-Regulated Militia. I mean, you can see here's my traditional paints. I've got canvases and all kinds of craziness back here, and then of course my drafting table. Actually, check this out. This is pretty funny. So this is a caricature of Snoop that I did in '94. I think I was like 14 years old, and I just found it. I was going through. I found all these books that my mom had kept since I was like, I think 10 years old. I said I was going to go to the American Academy of Art in Chicago, and she's always saved all of my stuff. So this is from when I was I don't know, I think 9 years old. So I've got all of this, these drawings and stuff from that time. So it's pretty cool. Here's another piece. This is from a series that I have, exploring Coco Chanel. We won't get into that too much right now. It's kind of heavy. This is actually a painting, the first painting I did along with Bob Ross, as an adult. Because I tried when I was a kid, you know what I mean, but failed. And this is actually one of the super rare backgrounds in my collection. That painting appears, and then this is actually another one of them that appears as one of the super rare backgrounds. And both of those as physicals in this 10K generative collection are going to actually be minted as one NFTs. And I forgot to show you this too. So here's this is the original from the Happy Little Hairdos this is the original illustration. It's all framed up. At the bottom here, you can see this colored pencil. This is the colored pencil that I used to do most of the skin tones on him. And that colored pencil is actually one of the items in the collection. So it's like in his mouth. So it's going to be, again, another one of the super, super rare items that appear. And so that piece, the original, essentially once the collection finishes and we sell out of the collection, everybody who has a happy little hairdo, their number of their token actually doubles as like a raffle ticket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the 10,000. There are 10,000 happy little hairdos. I'm going to take all the 10,000, put them in a generator, an algorithm, randomly select one, and then I'm going to mint the original as a one of one NFT, and then the person's going to get their original piece with the colored pencil framed up. So it's like super Inception meta craziness, you know?
Wow. What you got into Bob Ross as a kid? Because you're working on this happy little hairdos thing. We had you on with God Cloud and some other amazing people a couple weeks ago here at Doing Good when you were at NFT NYC.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about happy little hairdos, but I wanted to have you on a little bit more to discuss, you know, how you've gotten into it and maybe, you know, what you've seen along the way, and you've learned so much in the NFT world getting
Sure.
into that.
Yeah. So the original illustration I did in 2014, and you know, my work goes from, obviously you saw how serious the Well-Regulated Militia series is, like socio-political, very heavy concepts, to complete parody and complete goofiness. It's just like the gamut that I run as a person creatively. I don't really limit myself to saying, well, I'm only going to do this. So the original I did in 2014, the illustration, and I had the idea, actually, I forgot to show you this too. So this is from 2014. This is the first versions that I did of the original illustration. I think it shows on there even, yeah, like 2014, it should say on there somewhere. Yep, boom. So the concept was I was going to do it as a coffee table book, right? And I just wanted to do the one illustration and parody different pop culture things, movies, comic books, stuff that I grew up on and really like and whatever. Give him a mohawk, make him bald, all these different things. And I wanted to just do it as a coffee table book. And I was thinking, like, well, I could do it as a Kickstarter and all that stuff. But it just kept getting put on the back burner because I knew it would be something fun and great, but it also was like going to be a lot of work to do a Kickstarter to get all that kind of stuff going for it. As a musician, I was a musician for a long time, and I did a successful Kickstarter project, but it took like a long time and a lot of work. And I'm like, I had to pay the bills. You know what I mean? So I've had this project on the back burner for such a long time. And then in April and May, when I first really started digging into NFTs, was, you know, in the clubhouses and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I met Arts. His was the first clubhouse I landed in. And I saw what happened with the Bored Apes and like immediately recognized that this is what I've been waiting for this project. You know, so I'm usually a buck the trend against the grain type of person. I'm an artist, right? So the notion of me jumping in and trying to do a 10,000 collection is not something that I would normally do, but it was just screaming like, this is what this is for. This is what you've been waiting for this whole time. So like I got my iPad out, started like really cranking out the way I had to get the assets made, the different hairstyles, the different body types and all that kind of stuff. And man, I just went to town on it, and it was such an amazing experience. But in the meantime, like, again, I've been, you know, watching Bob Ross, and the memes, of course, resurfaced again and all that stuff, or probably around 2014 when I was doing that original illustration. But like, I was a kid when I first tried to do a painting along with Bob Ross. I was like 9 or 10 years old. And, you know, so he's kind of at the background of so much of our culture. And I just thought it'd be fun to play with. But then when I started working on the Happy Little Hairdos, I was going to pull up background noise, you know, just because I'm drawing and stuff. I'm like, well, I know that The Joy of Painting is on Netflix, so I'm going to pull that up. So I went on and it wasn't there anymore. It must have run its like licensing course or whatever. But then I saw a placeholder text for a documentary that was coming out later in the summer. I didn't know at what time, but it's called Happy Accidents, Betrayal, and Greed. And I was like, well, what the hell is this? So immediately I started searching, you know, Bob Ross, betrayal, da, da, da. So I started to find these articles. And long story short of that, first of all, watch the Netflix documentary. If you haven't, everybody should watch it. It's really heart-wrenching, but it's an amazing story. But essentially, his ex-business partners completely took the Bob Ross legacy from the family. So it's like his son, Steve Ross, who would paint with him on the show, it got so far to where they pretty much told him if he tried to paint under his Ross name, sell anything under the Ross name, that they would sue him, right? And so it's like, when I originally set out to do this project, even from back in 2014, I was like, well, I'm going to do the right thing. I want to get in contact with Bob Ross Inc. And, you know, even though it's a parody project and legally I have protection under parody law to do whatever I want with it, I'm like, I still want to do right. So I'm like, I'm going to contact the Bob Ross Inc. and stuff. And then when the NFT thing popped up, I was like, how crazy would it be? Like I could contact them, talk to them about this project, but then maybe guide them through what NFTs are doing and how powerful they are. And maybe they could make NFTs of the episodes. There's 403 episodes of The Joy of Painting. So imagine if you could say, I own episode 303, right? Like as an NFT, that would be a great way. Plus there's a lot of his paintings have never been sold. They've just been stored over all this time. So I'm like, well, what if you made them into NFTs? My thought is I'm going to talk to them about this. Then I find out about this betrayal aspect, and I'm like, oh, hell no. You know, so now my mission, it's been rough. So if anybody catches this or is watching, I'm trying to get a hold of Steve Ross himself, because there are parts of the project, like I showed you the original oil painting that I'm going to mint as a one-of-one NFT. If I can make this project crescendo to where I feel it should be, stuff like that's going to be valuable, and I want to give it to Steve. There's certain tokens I want to just give directly to him, and any of the proceeds that we can make, that they'll be donated right to him. There is a little bit of a notion that he's kind of like just pushed everything away that has to do with his dad's legacy, kind of jaded from the experience, which totally makes sense. If that is the case, I have some other projects that I'm working on to where I will donate money in Bob's name and will like say this was in memory of Bob. You know, he helped make this possible, XYZ. It's like one of the really cool things that we're doing just in that regard to try and take back some of the good part of the legacy. Actually working with a guy right now, Devin, who just jumped on the team to help with some marketing and promotion stuff. And we're going to be doing, as soon as some COVID restrictions lift, I'm in the Chicagoland area, and one of the biggest children's hospitals is right here in Chicago. And I don't know if you know this, but Bob actually died when he was 52 years old. Had lymphoma. The whole part of his legacy with his afro, you know, the notion was that he kind of got to a point where he just had a certain disdain for it, because it's like he couldn't cut his hair, couldn't change his hair because it was his brand, right? But then when he loses it all because of the lymphoma, then he missed it, you know, and there was just this weird like struggle. And that's the thing that we don't think about as, you know, regular people. This guy couldn't even choose what hairstyle he had, right? He was always under some sort of influence. But so the notion that he went bald, I didn't know that until, you know, earlier this year when I was working on the project. And so the bald one that I'd already created to kind of be the canvas for all the other hairstyles took on a whole different meaning. So like I have a really special bald token in the collection. There are a bunch of them that are called curated cuts. And the curated cuts, they all have a gold background. They're basically an and those gold backgrounds are only for those. They don't appear randomly. But the gold background and the curated cuts, what those are they have all of the assets that I created for the original characters. So it's like if I have a Mark Twain one or a Marty McFly one, those assets go into the collection, but the actual curated cut is the one that I made for such purpose. So they're like 51 total in the collection that are just kind of randomly, spread throughout the minting process. And there's just so many things I could talk about with this. But to go back to the bald one, basically it took on a new meaning, and I wanted the one that I have is a curated cut. The Fuck Cancer one that I have is actually going to be, again, part of a bigger donation to cancer research and cancer charities. But what we're going to do with this children's hospital is, once the COVID restrictions allow me to go in, I do have a bunch of like Joy of Minting material. So this is my afro, where I paint and talk and act like I'm Bob Ross. I do the whole little impression.
Wait,
but I'm going to go in. Can I put it on now? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, we're live. This is like, moments like this, we know we're alive. There you go. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Hi there, internet people. My name is Robert Ball.
Do you have your painting stuff? Do you want to give us a live demo?
All right, here's a little live demo. Give me a second.
You want to give us a little Bob?
We'll do a little Bob right now. All right, hold on. Here we go.
All right.
Howdy there, internet people. My name is Robert Boggs. I'm going to get into a little painting demonstration here. Some happy mountains, some happy trees. Get this palette knife right here. Once you get it on this mountain, you just got to go real soft. Got to let it break. You know what's funny about the Bob? Actually, Bob's soft tone. So he was in the Air Force early on, right? And he was really mean, they say, like just kind of gangster, cutthroat, typical, what would you call it, drill sergeant type, right? And after he got out of the Air Force, he said he vowed that he would never yell at anyone again, right? So that was like a big part of how he developed this persona. And like the notion of when you would hear that palette knife scrape, when you'd hear his brushes go, when he'd beat the devil out of it, like that, what had happened is, because he was speaking so soft, they would have to pump up the volume of the mics in the studio so loud that he inadvertently became the first AMSR like experience, which I think is a huge part of his success. And it was completely inadvertent, that the way that you'd hear that scraping, you'd hear the brushes on the canvas and stuff. So much of that was just because they had to have the mic so hot to be able to pick up his vocal. But so the idea is, I go in as Bob. I'm going to take the bald ones. So all of the kids, when I go in, there's going to be a bald. They're going to have a bald Bob to start with. And I'm going to walk them through talking just like Bob and everything, telling them that this is their world, this is their canvas, whatever they want to do, they create what they want to see. And even though they might, have no hair from their chemo and their experience, to draw whatever kind of hair they want to see on this Bob. So I'm going to take in the art supplies. I'm going to take in, the basically kind of like coloring book type of thing for them to draw on. And I'm going to give them all like afro wigs too, so they can be Bob as they paint and draw on top of this as well. So those are just some of the things that we want to do to kind of like bring back, because it's actually, this is how disgusting it was that when he was in his last days, he was doing like 2 and 3 episodes at a time, just going overtime to try and get as much work done as he could. And the business partners didn't want anyone to know he was sick, because they just wanted to keep pumping out, episodes and keep the money flowing. And it was so bad that like, and you'll see all this in the documentary. I'm kind of giving you the Cliff Notes version, I guess. But it was so bad that that there were people that didn't even know he had passed. Like Steve would run into people and be like, "So how's your dad doing? What's going on?" And like, it's like, nah, he's he's not with us anymore, you know, and they just didn't want people to know. They didn't want people to know that he had passed. It's a really, really weird thing. So, you know, I've got stuff inside the collection that actually references that, and tries to kind of fight back against that now and everything. So it runs the gamut from just being goofy and fun. Like here's my, this is the prototype I have of the gold pick. So it's a little bit janky here, but I'm actually going to get these. It's going to be some fun special stuff. I'm not going to say what it is yet, but we also just got like this. This is the Happy Little Hairdo brew. So we have our own limited edition coffee. And actually the only people who are going to be able to purchase are going to be people who have a Happy Little Hairdo. And then also I'm doing giveaways and stuff for it. Like I'd love to try and build community. So like this one has, I think, 42 different tokens from the collection in it. And I've got a Twitter giveaway right now that's basically if you have one of these that's on the label and you just retweet it with your name, you're gonna get a chance to win a free bag. So fun stuff like that. But yeah, the community building aspect of NFTs has been a wild ride. I mean, it's been super fun. There's so much connection and stuff happening, but at the same time, I got sick after NFT NYC, came back, had COVID pneumonia. I was literally out of commission for a month, wasn't on my phone, wasn't texting, wasn't tweeting. And this is right after, we had a kind of a crescendo in a release for the Happy Little Hairdos. We did it on Bob's birthday. It was like we did a couple of pre-sale events, and then we did the official release on Bob's birthday, which was October 29th. But then it was crash and burn, like, because I'm pretty much a one-person team on the project. I have Chuck, who's been doing all my coding, and he does all the, website connection, the Web3 stuff, and all that amazing work that he's done there. But when it comes to marketing and promotion, it's just been me. And, I wasn't around to do any of this stuff. And as much as the community is awesome, it's kind of like that out of sight, out of mind, no matter where you're at. And I wasn't in the clubhouses. I wasn't on Twitter spaces. I wasn't tweeting. I wasn't Instagramming, all that stuff. And, I would, at that point, it pretty much screeched to a halt. So it's so crazy how important it is. The community's there, but you have to be on all the time, really, to stay relevant and to stay in people's minds. And so that's right now, the blessing I'm taking and taking it all in stride, because the collection stalled and stuff because of all of this, I think is a big part of the reason why, just because I wasn't around to promote. But, it's given me some time to reflect, to look at some things, see what we want to do to push everything forward. And, you get to see who's really, really in your corner. You know what I mean? When you kind of fall off the map, but there's still people checking in on you and all that kind of stuff. Plus, I just lost my dog. That was really tough. There was a week I was gone from that. Like my little baby girl, Frances, I've had her since, 2008. I had her for 14 years, and she was through all my, they're always there through the dark times, but she was there through like all of my creative successes too. From like, I got arrested in 2008 for protesting fossil fuel and singing a song about it. You know what I mean? All over the news, from here to Good Morning America. And then I ride a bicycle that year from Chicago to Washington, D.C., like as part of the protest. She was along every step of the way. All the memories that I'll have of my creative achievement for the last 14 years, and somewhere or another, she's at the back of it. Like even the melodies to the songs would happen with a lot of times me just randomly singing to Frances, and then something popping up. I'm like, oh, that's a good melody. I got to do something with that. So, life happens. And I think in the space, not just NFTs, but just the notion of the hustle and the grind of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship, especially, there's this always on attitude, and life happens and tells you otherwise. You know what I mean? And so I've definitely had that experience. 2021 was like the back half was so amazing, and it looked like this ramp, and I was just gonna shoot to the freaking moon and to Jupiter and beyond. And then, the brakes came on. But that's all right. It's just taking things in stride.
Wow. I mean, that's certainly something for those artists out there, who are like, how do I do this? How do I get in? And you're saying something important here. Like it takes showing up. It takes showing up
Yeah.
a lot, right? I mean, there's no way
Yeah.
around it. It seems like.
100%. I mean, I think it takes, and honestly, I think it takes showing up more than it does quality. It's it's a weird place where it's quantity over quality when it comes to like work and showing stuff and everything. Um, Really, if you show up, so example of that even, and I don't want to disparage his quality of work, but my brother has been finding success in the NFT space, and he's always been a creative person. He's an artist at his soul, but like he went to Second City for comedy writing and improv, and so that's always been his kind of the way he leans. But he's also always painted. He just never went to art school. He doesn't have training and quality technique, but the spirit and the genius behind the stuff that he creates is always humorous, and it gets your mind going. And so I've been telling him, I was like, dude, this is the space now and finally for you to start to realize that you could be an artist, like if you want to really explore that. And I said, because there's a huge part of it's digital trash art, but there's a whole trash art movement that you would like fit into like in spades. And so he created this persona for himself, the trash paint tycoon, and he's been selling work like crazy. You know what I mean? And he's like making a name for himself. And a lot of it is just the fact that he's showing up with this stuff. Like, so he's got a project right now that he's doing. He's calling it Trashuary for February, where he's doing a mint. He's open seed minting, so lazy minting, whatever. But he's doing a piece a day all through February, right? And so, and with the speed that he could paint, because he can be prolific, because he could paint 5 pieces in a day, where I'm still working on one painting for 4 years. You know what I mean? So that's a way that he gets to show up. But I guess like we're doing this little interview and this talk now. There are different ways to show up. It doesn't always have to be with your work specifically, but showing up is definitely crucial, I think, especially because of not just the space, but again, it's just the notion of the internet and the temporariness of attention is just like so fleeting, So it's like the only way you can be constant is by showing up, not by having legacy work necessarily, at least at this point. You know what I mean? Van Gogh would have to show up every day. Leonardo da Vinci would have to show up every day. He doesn't get to have the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. The Mona Lisa can matter later probably, but right now, that's where it's like sometimes with this well-regulated malicious series, this work I've been working on for, work on a painting for 4 years. What the hell does that mean? You know what I mean? Because it's like, how do you make that matter? Just got to show up every day, twice a day. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you have to show up in across the larger sense of the metaverse, from Clubhouse to Twitter Spaces to crypto voxels to Instagram, and showing up at all the places. Like it's not it's no longer you can just have that show with the NFTs and people know who you are like once or twice a year. It seems like this is showing up online, showing up. I mean, maybe you can just like talk a little bit more to that, because a lot of people come to me and ask me these questions about, like, oh, I just like minted a bunch of NFTs. Why isn't it working? Or oh, like, how do I get into it? But I
Well,
think there's something that really needs to be spoken about. It takes a lot to show up. And
sure.
I'm curious, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think the one part is we got this, you know, Beeple is on the cover of High Fructose, right? So it's like soon we're going to see the shift to where, art publications are you start to recognize NFTs more, because like even High Fructose and these traditional art magazines haven't written a lot about NFTs at this point, which is like you would think they would be all over it. Christie's and Sotheby's are, and everybody else, Basil and whatever. Um, but I think, the people who've been in the NFT space for such a long time, um, from 2017 and some even earlier than that, whatever, like around the inception of the idea, like, they get a little bit frustrated when they hear the Beeple. It's kind of like BC and AD, right? It's B would be BB before Beeple, right? So it's like there's NFTs before Beeple and then after Beeple. I mean, there's just no way other to slice it. Like that one sale is the milkshake that brought all the boys to the yard. You know what I mean? So it's like after that, there's the gold rush. And this happens all throughout human history, right? But once the original stakes are put in the ground, it's a battle. It's like you're back to normal. And I think there was so much made and so much happened in the first part of that after Beeple, um, that there were people making so much money, and so fast and getting so much attention. And part of the attention they were getting was because they were making money. All that stuff like cycling through that. There's this idea that I can just show up once and be discovered. And, maybe it's a little bit more possible than it was previous to the NFT landscape. But overall, I've told people this time and again, like, we being early adopters in the space, just like any technology or early adoption of anything, you get to help start it on a course. But once Disney and Coke, Adidas, Subway has an NFT. I don't know what the hell it is, but once everybody comes, then it's just like it's back to the same attention hacking methods that you need, and the same kind of showing up and the same kind of fight. Like there's no more you get a spotlight on you just because. And so like then it's again we go back to, well, I never sold my paintings or my prints as a traditional artist in a physical space. Like if you're one of those people, you can't just show up and paint something. It takes connections and stories. So for me, a big crescendo for me with my physical art. 2016, again, I'm in the Chicagoland area. The Cubs won the World Series. My family's a bunch of diehard Cubs fans. My dad especially, and I knew I had to do this painting. Like I did this painting of the Cubs winning the World Series for my dad, and it wasn't because we had like this Leave It to Beaver relationship. Like I just did this podcast with a psychologist, Gary Penn. I haven't posted it yet on my Twitter or Instagram, but if you get a chance to check it out, it goes deep into this relationship thing I have with my dad. But it just was not. I didn't do this painting for him because it was like, oh, I love my dad and this like thing. It was because I just knew I had to do it. I was called to do it. So I do this painting. I posted on my Facebook like him opening it and everything, and he starts bawling, and there's this whole emotional moment. So then I start sharing it through the channels, things that I've done in the past where I've seen some of my own work kind of go viral. So I start doing the same thing, sharing it into these channels, and at the height of it, it winds up on SportsCenter's top plays, right? So this painting I did for my dad, I get a message from ESPN says, hey, do you care if we put this on our top plays? I'm like, yes, absolutely. So like, I'll grab you this real quick to show you. The painting is actually, again, a 30 by 40, so it's a little bit larger, but this is the piece, and this one is actually signed by Eddie Vedder. Eddie Vedder's a big Cubs fan, and he has some of my prints. I sent them out to him. He's like, "Well, tell him to send an extra one. I'm gonna, sign it to him." It says, "To Jay all the way. We did it, Eddie Vedder." And so, that was the kind of stuff that was happening because of this painting I did for my dad. He gets on Sports Center. Then I'm doing like charity events with the Cubs players, the owner, all of that stuff. And that year, I started selling prints of that piece, that exact print I just showed you. It's 12 by 18. I mean, it was like I was just boom, boom, boom. People are like, I want 5. I need 1. I need 2. I need, this is the same experience I had with my grandfather or my uncle or my dad or da-da-da-da. And so, it's not my best painting. It's not the best sports painting ever. But as far as the legacy of what the story is behind the painting, you can't make it up. Like you just have me go, we put the wig on because we're live, those kinds of things. Like, no matter what, you can't go back and make up this story for this painting. And that's where the energy comes in for the way that it got exposure and everything else. So, I'm selling so many prints, and then I start selling limited edition prints, and then I'm doing more work, again, like I said, with the Cubs, of the players and whatever, and then selling that work, and then donating pretty much all the paintings I did for those charities. I would just donate the painting, and then I would have prints, and I would have the player like sign a print. So that's how I'd make some money. I'd be like, well, you signed it, I signed it, and I could sell it for a higher cost to make some money for the work that I was doing for the charity. But I would always donate the painting free and clear to them. So, I guess the reason why I'm bringing that whole thing up is because that was me in the traditional noisy world where there was no like convenience of the separation of NFTs to say, oh, we have a separate thing here. We have a separate pocket of attention that you can get into. This was like the entire world. You have to get into the attention of the entire world, right? So the best advice I could say is like the way that we go into the NFTs, it's a niche, right? Now there's niches inside of the niche of NFTs. So like the trash art from my brother is a niche inside the niche, right? So starting to find that target thing, but this is no different than it's been forever. It's just that we got the notion that NFTs were just this one little thing that we could go into and boom, like magic, we were successful and everything else. So I think the only thing I can say is find your story, tell your story, be authentic with your story, and find your tribe, find the niche your why, the reason why you're doing what you're doing is so powerful to connect to people, I think. So.
I love that. Talking about the why you're doing it, the story.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you want to share a little bit more about like what you've learned over the course of your career as an artist, and then how you've transitioned that storytelling into the NFT world and sharing your why. What have you found that's worked? I mean, maybe not just for you, but that you've seen out there in the world that might help others learn from in terms of telling their story, figuring out their why, and sharing it, and how to go about sharing in this digital world.
Sure. So one thing I always tell people to go watch if they haven't seen it is Simon Sinek has a TED Talk called Start With Why. That is just an incredible 15, 20 minutes, whatever the talk is, that will change your life no matter what you do, even if you're not doing creative things. But, starting with why, it's just that point of being authentic is people can sniff it out no matter what if you're not being honest and true and authentic. And so it's like, even the notion of the Cubs stuff that I just talked about, like, I'm not a huge Cubs fan, but it's like, I wouldn't have been able to do this just with any other team. You know what I mean? It's just there's something that's been seeded in me since I was a kid. Like I can remember my dad, like I said, was such a huge Cubs fan. We had this bar room, and in his bar room, there was larger than life Cubs mural painted by like this local artist, and that was, you know, part and parcel of me both looking at this and saying, "Wow, that's super cool. I want to do that. I want to paint like that." And also then, of course, the Cubs connection. So it's like, I guess just being authentic with your why. And if your why is only to make money, then that's going to be like a tough sell. You know, you have to have some other purpose that guides you, some other motivation. So for me, like I said, sometimes it goes from social, political fire that I have about some sort of righteous indignation I have about a cause that I want to rally behind, to, you know, a gift from my dad, to something that I think is just hilarious. You know, I don't know. I mean, I guess mainly it's just like, you got to be real and you got to be you. And if you're not doing that, if you're trying to fake that, it's going to, we talked before about showing up and being consistent with showing up. And it's going to make it that much more difficult, if not impossible, to show up, because you're putting on this persona that isn't even you. I mean, unless I guess you could make up a full character and do something crazy, there's probably potential for anything. But in general, my best advice would be just like drill down on the most authentic aspects of who you are as a person and tap into that, you know?
I think you're talking about something very interesting that takes time and years to develop, is to understand who you are. And, you know, because maybe you figure out who you are now, who you are next year and the year after. And, you know, that might change, but also like just to begin with finding parts of yourself that feel authentic and real uh, takes time. And maybe there's some people who are a little bit younger in the crowd. What would you say to them in terms of starting out with that part?
Okay, that's cool. Fair enough. There's two parts. One, I'll say, um, you know, I was 10 years old when I said I wanted to go to the American Academy of Art. I did have it figured out early on. Obviously we changed. You know, I grew, and a lot of stuff changes over the years. But a lot of my purpose and drive was, you know, just figured out from the time I was so young. So it's maybe a little bit more difficult for me to be entirely empathetic with the other side, because I've always asked them, like, how does a person not know what they want to do when I want to do like 10,000 things? I know there's like one main thing, but like in my creative spirit, I want to do all these different things. But the main thing I would say to like the younger audience, and even myself, if I were to talk to my younger self, is to always continue to be curious and to keep feeding yourself. Like, I read for like just, it's a hunger and a thirst I've had since I was young. Always have read, 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 read. And, you know, even to the point to when I paint or draw, most of the time I have like an audio book on that I'm listening to. So like when I'm working on this Frederick Douglass piece, I'm literally listening to Frederick Douglass talk to me. Because there was a couple, like I listened through 3 or 4 books as I'm working on this piece, and one of them I was listening to was The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. So you've got this voice actor who is trying to embody the spirit and the intonation of what Frederick Douglass would have maybe sounded like, and delivering Frederick Douglass's words right to my ears as I'm doing this painting, right? So when I say to feed yourself, like a lot of people get into creative blocks, I guess. I hear that happens. I've never experienced it in my life because, again, I've had too many things I want to do. And I think it's because if we look at it almost like we're depositing into a bank, right? When we read, when we have our life experiences, like I said, my my COVID experience, my experience with my dog, passing. These are things that go into the bank. Heartache from your breakup. Lean into that pain. Lean into the joy, the pain, the things that make us human. Get those experiences. Those are deposits in the bank, right? So reading, if you don't have those experiences, you can read about them. If you don't know what it was like to live in the time of the civil rights movement, read about it, watch documentaries, find out about it, feed yourself. Even if it's just science fiction or whatever it is that you love, you're putting deposits into the bank. And then when you go to create, you're withdrawing from those assets. And then, you get to cycle it back, and it just becomes this living thing in and of itself. So, you might not have, again, all the life experiences younger, but the more you read and experience through other lenses, you can kind of hack that and artificially get some of that. So just feed yourself, and feed yourself a lot. It's just like so if you think about food as an analogy, if we just feed ourselves junk food and we don't feed ourselves things that will sustain our body, then we'll become diseased, we become unfit, we can't walk up the stairs, we can't do the things that we need to do, right? So if you don't feed your creative spirit the things that it needs to create a healthy, creative cycle, then naturally you're gonna tap out. So it's like, not to disparage again any kind of art or whatever, but it's like if you're only listening to gangster rap and it's only talking about one aspect of something, that might be a spice that you can use in your cooking, right? But if that's all you're listening to, it's not going to sustain you. You've got to read, you've got to experience life, you've got to, again, get into different culture and things of that nature. So feeding yourself good food, doing good food, you got to eat, you know what I mean, proper. So that would probably be one of the biggest things I could say.
Wow, I love that so much. I help out with a bunch of food rooms on Clubhouse, and I love that tie between food and art, visual art and food, and how we've got to feed ourselves with quality food, because,
Mhm.
Food and experiences and leaning into the joy and pain of life, that we don't need to, numbing the pain doesn't necessarily give us the food that we need.
Exactly.
What lessons have you learned in terms of leaning into the joy and pain that you might be able to share? Like how do you lean into it? How do you reflect upon it? How do you make sure that it's not just numbed away, that it's something really in the bank for you?
So obviously my experience with losing my dog recently is the highest level of what I can say with that. I actually wrote, and you could go back through my Instagram if we're on Instagram right now. I to the point of not following my own advice, I don't post a ton on Instagram because I look at my Instagram more as a curated space, and I like to only post things that I want to remain there as almost like a gallery, even though I know that's probably wrong. The best way to hack that, I guess, is to go into posting more stories and do stuff like this, so then we're still getting that interaction on Instagram. But if you go back in my feed, and you don't have to go too far, again, because I don't post a ton, you can start to see more photographs of my dog, Francis. And there's one that as I was scrolling back the other day to look for these pictures of the Bob Ross illustration, because I knew those I had posted back in 2014. As I'm looking to find those, I start scrolling past these images of my dog, and there was one where I'd posted, it was her and I laying in bed, and the caption was, because I know one day your eyes won't open. I appreciate the fragility of this moment, you know. And I would, a lot of times when I was with Frances, I would try and make myself sorrowful. I would literally try and make myself sad, and I would talk about her mortality. And some people would think that that was sick or crazy. I've actually got a painting in my living room that I did recently of the memento mori, the notion of always remembering our mortality. And it's got these two skulls. One is looking backwards, one is looking forward. And it's kind of like this notion that we get lost in the past, we get lost in anticipation of the future, and we forget the moment. And to remember our mortality is so important. And so with Frances, particularly, I wrote a song about 10 years ago. I never recorded it. It's something that I know I'm going to do now. I'm going to record this song. But I wrote a song for Frances about 10 years ago that explores all this, that explores the pain that I'm going through right now. The song talks about it. So my favorite book, and if anyone hasn't read this book, and even if you have read this book, read it again, because it changes every time I read it, because I change every time I read it. But it's Khalil Gibran's The Prophet is far and away my favorite book. And in it, he talks about, you know, joy and pain. And one of the things that he says in there that I, you know, was trying to do with Frances, and that I try to continue to do in my life, is he says, look at your, if you can look at your season of sorrow and realize that it's colored by your seasons of joy, then you'll see how interconnected that they really are, and how like dependent they are on one another. So it's like, I always try and, you know, look at a little bit of, whenever there's something there's the joy there, I always try and color it with a little bit of sorrow, because then I'm able to borrow from the joyous times, you know, some of that I need when I'm in my sorrow. So I think the notion of not muting it, though, because that even in and of itself is a little bit of a you know, a hacking of what the emotions feel like. But to be able to lean into it, I think, and let it shape your creative energy. You know, just look at the vices, look at the things that you do that you know you really aren't, and that you really wouldn't do in clarity, moments of clarity. So it's like, if you start eating too much, if you start like over indulging in something, anything that you might do to try and mute like a sorrow or a pain, would be something that I would, you know, it would set off like an alarm in my mind of like, I need to watch out for this, so I can kind of more experience what I'm supposed to be experiencing in this moment, versus kind of just trying to, you know, run away from it. So
There's a sort of meditation within the experience of it, and I mean within like a Jungian philosophy of like the individuation, kind of falling more in and finding the right amounts to how do we respond in such a way uh, for each uh, for for each experience, and interact, you know, interact in like a way that makes sense at a level. And then I think there's this other thing that we're discussing, is how to really feel, how to really meditate inside of an emotion, and let that be an inspiration inside of yourself and inside of your art. How to not let it tear you up is another thing. And
yeah,
um,
absolutely. No,
but
absolutely.
also that you're able to focus that into your art, that you're not just feeling into the, you know, pain, suffering, or into the joy, that you're doing it with purpose, and you're also channeling it into your art. You're not doing it without a space to put it into. And I think that's an important thing to recognize here, that it really, that going into the pain and into the suffering, into the joy, and that meditation inside of it, is also with purpose, and you have an outlet for it within your art.
Yeah, I mean, I've always wondered, like, and counted my blessings for no matter what sort of tragic, you know, or joyous thing that I'm going through, that I have this outlet to be able to use. Like, so many people don't, they don't have art or creativity. Well, they think that they don't. I guess that's the thing, right? I read this book when I was in art school. I was probably 18. It's called The Artist's Way, and it's another great book. And she talks about basically just creativity, but it doesn't mean like I paint or I sculpt or I do digital art or whatever it is, or I'm a photographer. It's like the the practice of living is a creative process, and our days, our palette, our actions, our brush strokes, and our life becomes the canvas that we paint on. So it doesn't matter, we're all creative beings. And so, it brings us back to being able to tap into that creativity no matter what. I have a question for you real quickly though, because you asked me about, this notion of the community and success and all that. So my question back to you is, well, first, it's a congratulations on your success with your collection. And then the second part is, how do you think it happened? What'd you do? I'm the interviewer now. Aaron, let's hear it.
Perfect. I'm okay with it. Okay. So for everybody watching, I just launched a collection last night of my picture poems that I've been working on for 4 years, and got into it after trying to find a way to connect my meditation poetry writings that I started in India a few years before with the photography work that I've done for my whole life. So I think part of the success for me is of selling out as of today, and I'm so thankful. Number one is this is the first time I've announced it for I announced it on Twitter, and then I came on here, so this is my celebratory thank you. Number one, I'm so thankful. Number two is that I have friends in the space, also creating for people, and I've created a lot of things for people and not done it for money, and I've shared my story, and I've talked about my story and listened to others' story, that it's not just my story, that's an interactive story. I think that's a second thing. And number three is that I've launched a couple little pieces here and there, and through that launching of little pieces, I've onboarded my community. I've gotten them to not only understand my story, but also how to use NFTs, from the technical and the emotional stress that can be very palatable. And yeah, so I've onboarded them, or at least a few people, and I continue to strive to get more people on board to be able to interact. And I think that's really it, is that interaction. It's like, how can you support a Kickstarter if you're not signed up for Kickstarter? And like I've been thinking about using this series as a Kickstarter for a couple years, because I'd gotten an art residency to work on this project before the pandemic, that I was gonna fly out and have some shows in like crazy locations based on the series. But and that was supposed to happen for May of 2020, and obviously that hasn't happened yet. But it's but it was now I just felt like it was the right time. And also it happened because I had a little push yesterday for my Clubhouse birthday, that I've been on Clubhouse for 1 year. And it was a year from my 100th interview with Kenny Schachter, and I learned about NFTs the morning of like getting onto Clubhouse in the evening. So I was like, okay, now's the time. So I think it was like interacting with it slowly in my own work, because I know a lot of people doing their own work and how their success is. But I think for me, it's kind of taking a little bit of a slower approach and saying like, okay, I need a little push to do it, and launching a small collection and having that success, and now being super excited and saying, now I'm going to do the next small collection. So that was it for me, is like that small success, one small success leading to the next small success, and feeling
Sure.
good about it along the way.
Right. No, that's awesome. And like again, the gratitude thing is such a huge piece of, obviously it's one of those things again that resonates. People can see it, with the authenticity, especially in this space. But it brought something else that you said. Well, first of all, it's crazy that 4 years, like you said, we're on such a similar trajectory with some of these projects that we've had that have been building for such a long time and then find their space here, right? Which is super awesome to hear that. But it brings me back to something you had asked me earlier, and I didn't reference this, about the notion of success from the traditional art to like the NFT space. And the onboarding aspect of what you were talking about just a minute ago is something that I really took like the reins on when I first started doing some of this stuff in NFTs. And I started talking to people that are, they've been supportive of me, they've been collectors or whatever it is. And I've said, I took to them and say, hey, you know me, you know my work, you trust me. This is a new thing. You should follow me into this space. And then walk them through, some of the process. So like the first NFT that I created, actually, it goes back to the notion that I don't put reins on myself as far as my creativity goes. And sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's crazy and funny, is pretty much kind of a parody of the space itself. I think it was back in April of last year when I first posted these, maybe March. But I was looking at NFT, and I was just kind of brainstorming and listening to different things. And for some reason, I heard non-feelable tickle when I said NFT. So what a non-feelable tickle, I'm like, what would a non-feelable tickle be? And so basically I minted on OpenSea 10 non-feelable tickles. And I sold the first 3 to, again, people who are collectors of mine, people who like are friends and already have my work and whatever else. And I said, hey, listen, this thing is crazy and it might sound outrageous, but I promise you in 5 years, you're going to be happy you bought a non-feelable tickle. I was like, I don't know what it means. I'm like, we're going to be laughing all the way to the bank. It's, NFTs are no laughing matter. So I was dumping out all the like idioms and cliches and whatever. But there's still, there's actually, I think there's 10 non-feelable tickles. There's 9 that are the copies, they're the prints. And then there's the original, which they all have this QR code. The QR code points back to the one-of-one non-feelable or non-fungible tickle, which also comes with an unlockable, which is I come and personally tickle you. So it's a feelable tickle comes with a non-feelable tickle. So the whole thing, I guess I was trying to say is like, I don't know what this means. People are laughing at NFTs. People don't understand it. What is a digital piece of art? What does that mean? But I was like, if it makes you laugh, then it's doing what a tickle's supposed to do. So it is a non-feelable tickle, and it worked, right? So that's my first project. You can see them on OpenSea. They're there. They were like listed, I think at the time they were listed for like $1,000 each. So I wanted the whole story to be artist sells $10,000 in non-feelable tickles. And again, how that would, matriculate into more stories and craziness. Because, we all hear about the potato salad that sold on Kickstarter for like $5 million or whatever else, I was kind of spoofing off of all of those ideas. But it brings me back full circle to what you were talking about. You can bring people into this space. I've got a coffee shop, so again, for the Happy Little Hairdos, Happy Little Hairdo Brew, like there's a coffee shop I work with locally. They have 4 different places here locally, but they do all their own roasting, organic beans, getting things done the right way, all that stuff. But like I have a good relationship with them and their art scene that we, try and establish through their coffee shops. I'm going to do some NFT talks where I'm onboarding, doing small seminars, letting people know, what this space is and kind of articulating it more to people who are complete strangers. And again, it's just like people can follow you in to the space, and it's going to happen more and more. The Super Bowl is going to be having NFTs in it and everything. We're going to see all that stuff. Awareness of it is just going to continue to grow. So the notion of, like you said, having that as an option to bring people in. And then, of course, on the back of gratitude, I just saw on the list here a little while back, Alchemist of Life followed me here on Instagram, thanks to this talk, right? And the notion of alchemy is something that I use consistently in my life. And I did a kind of mini TED talk at a local university a few years ago. And I said that gratitude is my alchemy. And so like the way that we can manifest and turn things into opportunity often is on the back of just gratitude. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's like, again, it's a huge part of the process, just having gratitude. And that then goes right back to the question of joy and sorrow. It's easy to be grateful for our joy, but if we can find a way to be equally grateful for our sorrow, then we can alchemize it. We can turn it into gold. The philosopher's stone is gratitude. And again, that Khalil Gibran, the prophet, just doubled down on that again. It's such an amazing, amazing book with so many amazing lessons in it.
Well, we're wrapping up our hour. That was some heavy stuff that I think, some life lessons, really. I want to put that out there, that this is going to be available to watch later, because it's just filled with some beautiful moments of life and listening to life, and how life connects with art, and how art connects with NFTs, and the full circle of life to NFTs, and that it's, it's not so separate. It can be a part of life. It can be an aspect and a beautiful thing as, we continue our art making practices. So I want to say thank you to you, the gratitude so much. And why don't you tell everybody where they can find you across the internet as you get back on from being sick? Share with us where we can find you.
Sure. So JJ Weinberg, WEINBERG.com. That's my website. If you do my Linktree / JJ Weinberg, easy way to find links to everything from that piece that sold in the auction to I did this charity event with George Lopez last year. George was crying about this piece that I did for the charity. Like all those kinds of things, the piece that I did for my dad, the painting, the Sports Center clip, all that stuff I think is pretty much you can find on my Linktree, which then takes you to my Twitter, Instagram here where we are. And I think my YouTube, because I've got a lot of YouTube stuff I do, especially during the pandemic. I started doing like a little bit of a YouTube series. I actually posted a lot more on my Facebook at that time, but I kind of did like this perspective, talking about just life stuff, kind of things that we're doing now. So I had a small little YouTube stint there. I sometimes think about seeding back into that, but it's just trying to find the time for everything. So
totally fair. I really appreciate you being here here at with Doing Good HQ. I'm Aaron Jack with the Aaron Jack Show, Artist to Art, over at Aaron Jack Line Art on Instagram, and I am Aaron Jack One on Twitter. So, and I'm also on Clubhouse. I'm also blah blah blah, across the internet. So we're here about once a week or so, give or take. So I really appreciate you being here with us, going live, whether you're watching in synchronous or asynchronous space and time, because there's just so much to learn from this episode that I've, come to reflect on and that I've learned. So would you like some last words before you exit out, and I'll wrap up here?
No, man, I just appreciate you. Appreciate the time. Appreciate what you do with the channel, and that you're, reflecting back all of the energy that you've accumulated through the people who've come to appreciate you and to come to appreciate your platform. Sharing that with others, it means a lot. So every person that's got a chance to hear me because of this, they wouldn't have known before this. And like you said, the archival aspect of having this, that we can go back and reflect on this later. They say that we teach what we need to learn. And so a lot of times I don't even know what the hell I'm saying. But then I can say, oh, okay, actually that made sense. And I can go back and say, Aaron drew this out of me in this conversation that I didn't even know was dormant from all that good stuff that I've been feeding myself for so long. Aaron drew it out in that moment. So I think that's a really big thing. So I appreciate it, man.
Thank you. All right, whenever you're ready, you can just exit out.
All right, thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching us here on Doing Good HQ, with Doing Good HQ, around Doing Good HQ. It's just an awesome NFT platform that you should definitely check out if you haven't already. You can put up to 200 people on a smart contract, and 5% or more goes to a nonprofit. So every NFT is paired with a nonprofit. So I really appreciate each and every one of you watching, and hopefully you're here with us each and every week that we're back here. And again, I'm Aaron Jack. I'm over at Aaron Jack Line Art. And thank you. I really appreciate you being here and learning with me today. Till the next time. Thanks so much.